So here are the Persians attacking. Those are supposed to be the immortals. And there are 300 Spartans waiting for them, and they throw the spears. It's right there. Okay, they'll show it in slow motion. There it is. You see it? The rubber spear bends. You go, ah! All right. That's just. All right, that's just funny. Okay. Now let's get back to class. City. Yeah, it's like that. That's great. So the map, the Greek map, will be due tomorrow. Did it show okay for the Battle of Marathon? Yes, Friday. And I love it. Using video game technology. They actually explain what happened, but it's pretty funny. We will watch a couple more of those. I think about 20 minutes. They're fun to watch. We will watch one on Spartacus, which I really like showing. And then I got to figure a couple for Hannibal and the Romans. The video game from 2003, Elephants, are worth the price of admission. Trust me. Okay, so I want to show that, yes, I want to show that on Friday. So I kind of had to go back a little bit to get to, did we get to the draconian laws and debt slavery, debt peonage? Is that? And they would do debt jubilees, but as soon as they got money from Lydia, they wanted the money. And you see this time after time in history. Sometimes they'll allow for more debt. Let people escape their debt, and sometimes not. But the thing about it is this is going to lead to revolution. It's a tiny group of people they've got to accumulate more and more and more of the wealth. And I get a little update thing from the Washington Post, and they have nothing on draconian laws, which is hard to believe in today's newspaper. No, it just said that there's going to be hundreds of billions or maybe well over $1 trillion, probably, that will go to Corona relief or stimulus relief. And almost all of it is going to very large businesses and very wealthy people who already have an extremely large amount of money. And so it's just amazing how you see it like, that's what happened here. It's kind of happening now. That, and the CDC is finally admitting that it's aerosol for the disease. It's in the air. Hand washing and stuff is important, but it's the mask. And if you don't like mask, I'm sorry, I hate it too. But that's what we have to do. And President Trump's press secretary just is positive. He might be in bad shape. I don't know how bad it is because they have not told the truth. But he's already had a couple times where his oxygen level tanked, and they're putting him on a cocktail of the strongest steroids they can do, that they only give to the people who are the most serious. I don't know if they're just throwing everything at him, but next few days, it's, they're going to act like everything's fine, but this could be a big time as this shakes. Weird and exciting times, and another hurricane's coming. And locusts, and a plague of locusts. All right, so let's get to Athenian democracy. So, this is where the term democracy comes from, and we'll come back to this in just a second, but I'll come back to what democracy means. But Solon, let me make sure this is recorded. In 594 BC, everything's BC. Give me a sec. So it seems to be recording. Okay, there's one like. Come on, people, we need more likes. Third period, a bunch of y'all started clicking likes. And so Athenian democracy. And so Solon, the big reason they did this is he was a tyrant too. And remember, a tyrant is not necessarily someone who rules. We think of tyranny as for their own personal gain. It's just how they took power. But he realized there is a revolution coming. And those in the underclass, the vast majority of debtors, are going to rise up and revolt. And they're going to, and their fury can destroy Athens, destroy their place in society, and also, thinking logically, this will leave a vacuum for other places to come in and conquer. Because these kind of revolutions don't end nice and neat. So this, in a way, is a revolution to stop a revolution. In our history, you could see that probably best case would be the Great Depression. The New Deal was a series of reforms because it looked like revolution was going to happen. And the big fear about that one is it might not be, the revolution might be fascist or communist. Who knows? So they wanted something else. But they overturned the Harsher's Law. That's supposed to be Solon right there. So debt slavery was abolished. Gone. And this meant there'd be freedom. Now there's still a problem. Great, we're no longer slaves, but what do these debtors have? I mean, they got nothing. They literally have nothing. And then there's going to be a citizens' assembly, and all citizens can take place, but only the top can hold office. But all citizens. And so this is getting closer to what we think of as a democracy. We're not quite there to it. We'll have to explain exactly what a democracy is in just a second. But, oops, sorry. So all citizens can participate. But they're still going to pick leaders, and it still had to do with the vast inequalities, which they would do something else about, partially by taking slaves. But this basic reform is they're coming to abolishing debt. That's coming a little bit later. This is a massive reform. And you'll see a similar thing in Roman history in about 200 BC. So this is a common thing and on throughout, for example, in Judea. And so this, don't write all this down. I just put this up there for me to refer to. This is the basic Solon, his constitution. Okay, before the term constitution was used. Constitution just simply means a written form of laws, a written set of laws that would establish a government. And you will see this term being used a little bit later on, but the first constitution that would survive would be the U.S. Constitution. There'd be a British Constitution, but there's actually a series of separate laws, not one document. The thing in the U.S. would happen. Okay, so the big thing would be those on top, the archons, the popular assembly, and then the citizens' assembly. And in the assembly, this is what I do want you to write down. There would be 4 classes. Upper to lower. And the reason why I didn't want you to write this down is I just thought, anybody want to pronounce this? The Pendaktas, anybody? Like, I don't speak Greek. Anybody? 4 classes. And the whole point about this one was, what made them the top? They can afford to pay higher taxes. They pay higher taxes. A menamor or is a okay, I've seen about 20 different definitions of how much grain this is. But they all pay in grain. Or the equivalent coin. So the lower class has to pay up to, this is over 500. And the basic positions, they could be the top, the archon, or generals. These would be the cavalry because they could afford the horses. Middle class, they're the hoplites because they afford the armor. And then lower class. Auxiliaries, they'd be shoot arrows, throw spears, the rubber spears. They would, the sling, you know what a sling is, slingshot. We tried, when I first taught Western Civ years ago, and we did a project and they made trebuchets, which is think of like a catapult, and a few other things. And somebody tried to make a sling, and let's just say it was dangerous. Because you're wrapping around and you let go, and I've seen people hit targets from 50 yards, just accurate as heck with them. But you sling this rope and you let loose on one side, and it's supposed to sling a rock. we had this thing going. We're just doing it with a tennis ball, and it's hitting people. Okay, we're done. No more. But the point was, it's technically democracy. It's technically democracy. But they have all different classes, and they would divide them up into groups. And the groups would not be based upon numbers. They would be based on who's in the class. So each group would be equal, but since there's fewer first class, they'd have more representation, is my point. The second class, the hippies, there's more, but they would be even with the bottom class. And they could not hold high office. For example, they couldn't be in the Council 400, they couldn't be an archon for the popular courts. And so that's how they first divided. It's more representation, but clearly those on top are way overrepresented. So, what made a citizen? Every Athenian citizen could participate, but only men. Women were complex, how they were treated, but they did not have as much rights as Sparta. So, all men over 30 had to be free, and at first, military training. But basically, all men had to have military training. And so if you could afford it, you're a hoplite or cavalry or auxiliary. But all had to have military training. Here's another of so on. And so that meant, in reality, only about 10%. Because it doesn't count women or slaves or people who were working there but not, more like serfs but not citizens. It was kind of complex. And so yes, more people had right, but a significant number. And so they did have elections for the leaders and also direct elections. Office, juries, they did have juries. I think I might put an example of a jury in here. So does that make sense? That's a citizen. And they're the ones who participate. So yes, this is a first democracy. It's a pretty amazing change where just a few hundred years earlier it was all chieftains who ruled by the fact that they were the most powerful, to a king was a little bit more accountable, to at least the idea that the people have some accountability or rule of law. Thank you, Aaron. I'll show you this. This is pretty clever, Aaron. Aaron put down how to pronounce it. Okay, that's very clever. I appreciate that immensely. That was good. Okay. So that's a citizen. And it's one of those, okay, we're leaving a lot of people behind, but it's still a pretty big step towards just a strong man in charge. And you notice how you have, throughout history, little bits where like more people have rights and then less and more. It's never like a straight line up or straight line down. It's just up and down. Where are we at now? Fascism's on the rise. We'll talk about fascism. Yeah. But also there's more desire for rights. And, okay. Once again, I need someone to help me pronounce this, but the Areopagus. I've heard this pronounced once, and then of course it's gone. But this is near the Acropolis, so the Acropolis, this is the spot where the government would meet in Athens. I just put it up there to show you the picture. So there you can see Athens in the background, and now it's a big archaeological site, but that's where the government met. And the bottom class could not go there. Only those on top could go. So yes, they participated, but they were still at the bottom. And they were really underrepresented. Did they like this? No. At first it was good. It was one of those, yes, we're going to change things. No more debt slavery. And then you can imagine what happened. Wait a second. You promised us a better life. Did life get better for most people? Slightly. Expectations did not meet the reality. And this is another one, time after time. You promised us a better life. And we're going to lead to another tyrant. After Solon was removed from power, it would be, okay, and he would come in, he'd be like the British and just make up some weird name like, and King Philip would come in. But the Peostratusa, I know, I'm just butchering it. Sorry, Greeks. Which, by the way, if you hear someone speak Greek, it's a beautiful language. It's really neat. But I speak Montana. So with that, this is actually the second time he tried to overthrow the government. He was a soldier. He tried to come in as a tyrant to take power. Remember, tyrant meant take power. And the second time he rode in after he trained an army of hoplites to come in from outside of Athens. And he rode in with a woman dressed up as Athena, the goddess Athena. Athens, Athena. This goddess of wisdom, by the way, what animal would represent the goddess of wisdom? The what? Real animal.
Oh. Horse?
Huh?
Horse?
Good guess.
Is it a bird?
Mm-hmm.
Is it an owl?
The owl, yep. Because owls are smart. How do we know that? They look smart. Owls are cool. Who agrees owls are cool? Owls are cool. They seized by force. But how he maintained power is he came in and said, I'm going to solve the problems of the debtors. You promised them a better life. There was a modest improvement, but not enough to make a real difference. And so that is what he did. He came in. And so he ruled for a long time. I mean, this is 34 years. He ruled as the tyrant of Athens. And sure, he and his family got richer, but he did eliminate some debt. Not all debt forgiveness, but debt. I would not be surprised that there's a good chance that could happen here. And so after he lost power, after 20 years of tyrants and the effort to try to maintain some control, Solon's constitution, which was still technically the law, but we had tyrant after tyrant, were replaced by Cleisthenes. And he would eventually be ostracized, which I'll explain in just one second. But 507 B, I forgot the capital, the C. By the way, it's actually BCE, before the Common Era. But so I just put BC because for years in Christian-dominated Europe and areas that dominated was before Christ. But that doesn't make sense in areas that aren't Christian, for example. So, before the Common Era, and what they did is he established a new council of 500, would be directly appointed by no longer by these classes, but by a division of all these different groups within those who live by the coast, the harbor, the county, or the city, and they would pick the council of 500, and it would not be the aristocracy, which still had immense power. So this is a big shift from the class-based Solon constitution to all the three different areas, not based on class, would choose the 500. And I'm not going to, this is the military and navy. They would appoint the 9 archons, not 1, that these would have various administrative functions. There'd be a court. They would make laws. And this was a pretty radical idea. This is pretty close to a combination of a democracy and a republic we think of today. Combination of a democracy and a republic. A republic is a government by representation, which we'll talk more about this. What is a true democracy? Who makes laws? Yeah, and what? Oh. They decided it's by majority rule of the people. So they do both. They pick representatives, That's the republic. And they vote on laws. So how they do it is, they propose laws. That's supposed to mean a law. I don't know why they decided this diagram. The law looks like a treble clef. But law, and then they vote on it. That is a democracy, where the people decide that. Now, the United States government is not a democracy in that context. The U.S., we pick a lot of our representatives, not all, our judges, technically not the president. But laws then are decided fully by them, the legislature. Now, some states, including Montana, have a system where Montana citizens vote on a law. Now, you've got the Navy U.S. history, but all along with 1,000 other things you might have forgot the name. But has anyone heard of a referendum or initiative? That's where voters vote on a law. And Montana has that. So there is a little bit in states like Montana, California, about 3/4 of the states have that. So, majority rules in democracy, republics voted by representation, this is both. Citizens, still pretty narrow, but more people. So it gives them a greater voice and no longer overrepresented by the very wealthy. And so, what are the main bodies? I love this one. This is supposed to be Pericles. We'll get to Pericles when we get to the Peloponnesian War. I know what you're thinking. We want Peloponnesian War. Not yet. So, that's where we get the Assembly, the Council of 500, and then the court system is actually just crazy. We already mentioned the Chief of State, which basically one of the different parts of government, the Archon. So the Assembly, Council of 500. Oh, the head of each would be elected, they serve 1 year. And so the whole point is they constantly are rotating people. The idea is one person does not get too powerful. Same with the Archon. 1 year, rotate them through. But the court system, absolutely insane. So the court system, 6,000 people from the Assembly are chosen to try, convict, and sentence people for crime. Can you imagine 6,000 people in hell? Because that's about trying you got a parking ticket, you go in front of the 6,000. Yeah, it was a little bit chaotic for the court system. And what's going to happen is things will get bogged down and people will be very upset. Because there's always, once you have a lot of commerce and trade and money, that's where the court system really hits in. And so it's a pretty amazing idea, but you can probably therefore with the 6,000 see the problem. So you have the Council of 500, the Assembly, all these people. By definition, it's got to be a pretty small place, doesn't it? The bigger it gets, how would they do this court system if it was the size of the Roman Empire? Or for that matter, the United States? It gets too unwieldy. Democracies have that problem. Even this kind of quasi-democracy or republic that was going to be created there. Pericles would never have worn that helmet, but they put him in that painting in the 1700s when that painting was made. That's one of those hoplite helmets with the big, because it looked kind of scary and cool. Yeah, I think in democracy, it's an interesting thing. And so don't forget, there are always elements of that. There's never really been a true democracy. And there's been a lot of republics. We are a republic, but we have democratic elements. But you could say, one thing about this is, and you can see it with going back to here, he took power because the vast majority of people, which meant the lower class, wanted him to have power. And so ultimately the people have power. If they would have said, we don't want him, he might have held power for a little bit, but eventually they would have had his head on a pike. Because that's how they got rid of tyrants back then. So, instead of making a system that is so had such strong reprisals against people they disagreed with, they formed something called ostracism. And this came with the Cleisthenes Constitution. They could remove an opponent for a year, but they keep their property. And so the idea would be, okay, if you have a political disagreement with him, you're not going to kill him. You just remove them from the state, they keep their property, and they can come back. For example, Callisthenes was ostracized. And, I'll get back to this in 1 second. They also reduced the number of capital punishment. They try to make it more humane by you would drink a cup of hemlock. Which, as I understand, that's a horrible poison to die with, but I guess it's better than being, gutted with a knife. That's kind of a weird thing to say. Drinking a cup of poison is better than being gutted. Good point. But ostracized would be like this. At first, they would break up pottery, and you would write the name of somebody you want ostracized, and if they had enough percentage and enough people voted for that person, these are actual pieces of the pottery from Athenian democracy, you would drop them into a larger pottery vase, and they would count them. And if there's enough people voted for one person, they would be ostracized. And soon ostracism became such a big deal that they started making special pottery for it that you could scratch the name in, so it wouldn't be the broken parts. And you could argue this is a much better system than just killing somebody. You get rid of your political opponents by saying, okay, you're going to be out of power for a year, but you don't lose everything. And that was a lot better than a civil war. And so there's elements that seem pretty good about this, but also that's kind of crazy. You vote for somebody and they're kicked out for a year. It's an interesting system. But then again, don't forget they're thinking, okay, we don't want a civil war. Persia. While Greek is forming their democracy, they're also having to pay tribute to Persia. That's where we got the Marathon. There's the Persian Empire by the time of the Battle of Marathon. It's pretty awesome, isn't it? Huge. Some of their best soldiers came from the Indus River. They went into the central plateau right there. Kazakhstan. I'm trying to pronounce it correctly. I would say Kazakhstan, right? It's Kazakhstan. I'm getting it. I'm getting it. By the way, anybody know what's happening right here? Right now? War. Azerbaijan and Armenia are fighting right now. They're shelling each other. It's not gone to full-scale war, but people are dying. They're fighting. And Russia's kind of supporting Armenia, but they're supporting Azerbaijan because they're Russia. Turkey's supporting Azerbaijan. A good friend of mine, his son is at an international school in Armenia right now. And yeah, it's right now. I know there's so many things going on right now that it's hard to keep everything, keep track of everything. Not just here in Helena right now with a record number of coronavirus, and then war, and then, okay, but pretty amazing empire. And this area right here, this is Lydia, and they actually tried to resist the Persians, fought a war with them, and they would be defeated, and the king, Cronus, which money would be named after him, he would be captured, and Darius tried to make an example of him before he actually attacked Greece. This is 8 years before. Anybody want to guess how he's going to make an example of him? Do you know what a funeral pyre is? A funeral pyre is where you would stack wood up and then put the body on top to cremate. And it would be done quite commonly for leaders as a ceremonial process. Well, Darius decided to burn Cronus alive, but putting on top of a funeral pyre made out of not wood, but what? His son stacked up, all alive, and then was going to burn that from the bottom up. The last second before, he pulled Cronus off and burnt his sons alive. Because he was being merciful. Now, are you with us? Yes, I'll do whatever you want. I'll be a loyal part of the Persian Empire. That's what the Greeks were dealing with. Yes, burned them all alive, all his sons. I think it was 14 princes. He stacked them up and tied up Cronus on top. Well, he didn't do it, but he had his people do it. And This was where you get very much of this, it would be known as Oriental a little bit later on, but the genuflecting and bowing to leaders, and to the Greeks who, especially you think about Athens, with this idea we're citizens and we have choices to make. I know they had slaves, so don't get bogged down too much in thinking everybody thought this way, but this was an absolute anathemism to them, that they're going to take them over and do this. So, where it all started with, I want to show Marathon. I just really want to show on Friday. It's Good Friday thing. But right here are the Ionian city-states. These were the ones created by the Greeks back when the Mycenaeans fell, and Ionia. Oh, I should add, here's that Celestines giving to the Persian ambassadors. So they gave the symbolic earth and water, which then a lot of gold too, but they gave tribute to the Persians already. And then in the 490s, they would say, we're not going to give tribute anymore. So they actually did give a lot of tribute. So the Persians just assume you're under our control. Think about it. Darius was willing to do that to Cronus. What's he willing to do to the Greeks? He thought they were part, you would say, a vassal to them. And so there's Darius's tomb, and those are the immortals. I think that's a pretty cool, his tomb at Susa. And the immortals, we saw them in the video, the cartoon video, jerkily moving, all exactly the same height. But they had straw shields, spears, and a dagger. And the big thing about them, the big advantage they had, they could move fast. But you can imagine how they'd be just cut apart by a hoplite, too. So, in 499 to 494, the Ionians revolted. And the Ionians were this part of Turkey. These are Greek city-states right here. They speak Greek, so they're Hellenic. They have the similar ideals of Greece. They have been paying tribute, and they've been under a Persian rule basically for the last off and on for 50 years. Cronus was here. And they begin to revolt. This city-state right here called Miletus, they revolted. Aristogoras was their leader. Basically what happened was, well, Aristogoras, they went to attack an island. Where's the island at? Naxos. And they failed. And Aristogoras didn't want to be blamed for it, and so he decided to revolt. And he went to Athens to beg for support. Athens, kind of euphoria over having this new democracy, this new form of government. Their fleet is becoming powerful. They really saw themselves as the leaders of Greece. They sent 1,000 hoplites there. And so Athens intervened in this civil war. Now what's going to happen? By the way, these are Greeks escaping from Asbestos. I got this out of the wrong order. I'll come back to this picture. So, in 4 years, the Persians destroyed the rebellion, slaughtered Miletus, slaughtered the hoplites, and invaded into Thrace. I'll come back, so don't worry. They slaughtered them, destroyed the hoplites, invaded into Thrace, which is this area right here. They even tried to invade up into the Danube and met the cannibals who drank blood, the Indo-European tribe here on the Danube. That didn't go so well. And so then they decided to take care of the Greeks. Remember the video it said that Darius was told, don't forget the Athenians. Don't forget the Athenians. And that would be the Battle of Marathon we saw in the video. They did a great job. They actually do a really good job in those. They're just also kind of funny. And the guy running around with his pants with big pockets on. And that was the first attempt. Marathon, Darius' assault failed. He pulled back. And that would be the first of those wars. The second one Darius was planning another attack. He passed away 4 years after the marathon. His son Xerxes took over. And Xerxes not only would take this Orientalism to a higher scale, Orientalism in the concept of being this divine right, not just divine right, divine king. He decided a massive land invasion in 480 BC. A massive invasion of these independent states, and that's why I showed you Sparta and Athens. I should add, virtually every other state had some kind of version of that. Tyrants, some more republic, some with democratic elements, some the kind of weird oligarchy, tyrant, monarchy like Sparta. But he had to cross at the Hellespont, which is over the Dardanelles, that narrow finger of land right here that separates Asia from Europe, that connects to the Black Sea. What is now Istanbul is right here. He had to cross here, and his plan was knock out Athens and then defeat any Greek resistance and make them bow to his will. To become part of the empire, here's the biggie: pay taxes. And he'll pick satraps that will make it worth their while. But the problem is that they got to get over this. So his plan was, almost forgot, Herodotus, the Greek historian, who would come about a couple hundred years after this, said that Xerxes had 2.5 million men in his army. There's no way he had 2.5 million men. But of course, if you want to defeat somebody, wouldn't you say there were 2.5 million to make yourself look better? It was probably closer to, you see figures anywhere from 70,000 to 300,000, somewhere in between that. But it's a massive army from its vast empire. And so you have foot soldiers, all kinds of different kinds of cavalry, archers, other kinds of auxiliaries. This is a massive force. But it's a real supply problem. As he invaded into here, he's got to be also supplied by sea, but they can't stay long. They're going to be out of supply. Men are going to desert. There's real problems with this attack. And last thing for today. So the plan was to build a floating or pontoon bridge. Here they are building the bridge. Anybody want to guess what happened to the bridge, the first attempt? It's going to be over 1 mile long. So you build boats, you connect it with boards over the top so it floats over the water. 1 mile long pontoon bridge. A storm came, knocked it off. Xerxes was furious. And what did Xerxes have done? This is a picture of him having his men flog the water. And they came out and beat the water into submission. And what happened? The bridge worked! So you can subdue the ocean. And then they are across it. That's probably pretty close to the way it was in this massive army crossing. I guess that's Xerxes. It started whipping the water. It's such a great story. So a little bit left to finish tomorrow. And then what do you guys think about, so it's about half as long as the Egyptian one, but I love the Egypt. I like Athenian Greek architecture too. So engineering and empire Greece. Start that tomorrow and then finish it on Wednesday. Sound good? It's a great show. We're probably not going to watch it through the Spartans, just went off time, but that's it. All right. Everyone have a good day. I will see you tomorrow. Matt?
I am taking the ACT tomorrow, so I will not be here.
I will film it.
Okay. Do you want me to release it?
Yeah, give it to me.
I could. What was this is called? The
Indus.
server I just looked. Okay.
Yeah, they went there. His Alexander soldiers were like, we're done. We're going home. We've seen the end of the world and we've had enough.
Oh, and then Gordian. Thank you.
The battle. Gordian. And the whole story is there was that. Have you heard of Gordian's knot?
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like looking up and reading. I just couldn't find any.
Yeah, it's one of those great stories. I don't know if it's true or not, You know, it sounds like something Alexander would have made.
Yeah.
Look how great I am.
Alright.
But it's still a good story.
That's a good story.
All right, then. Good luck. You have fun in the ACT.
Oh, I bet I will.
See ya.
Thank you.
We got the ACT. You guys, are you taking it tomorrow?
Yes, I am.
You punk. I took the ACT.
I'm very confused on what's